All right. Jungian four-function type models. You'll often hear a critique from this end of typology towards socionics being, they'll usually take issue with socionists saying that a person has, basically the ability to use all 8 information metabolism elements, or something close to that is their issue with it. And they're usually citing Jung and saying, like, there's only 4 functions: feeling, thinking, sensing, intuition, and then it's just a matter of, which orientation, which direction it's going in, introverted or extroverted. So everyone has a feeling function, but you're only allowed to have it in one attitude: extroverted feeling or introverted feeling, not both. I guess what I sort of wonder with this idea is, when I look at Psychological Types by Carl Jung, and I look at the idea of function attitudes, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be the case that a person could, in theory, have access to both function attitudes of a given function. Now, obviously, depending on the type, they may have more access to, let's say, maybe just hypothetically, I know it works different here than it does in socionics, but just, bear with me for a second. Someone who's sophisticated in their thinking function, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to utilize both thinking attitudes depending on the context. Maybe not equal ability in both, but perhaps an ability to utilize both in, obviously not concurrently, not at the same time, but an ability to have access to both, depending on context or whatever. And then there'd be some functions where they're less developed and they wouldn't maybe have access to both attitudes. Maybe they'd only have access to one, and it would be really primitive. But yeah, I don't see anything in Psychological Types. I know, feel free, to quote a passage from Psychological Types to refresh my memory. If there's a passage where it, Jung's I feel like Jung did leave a lot of things open-ended. So, I'm sure there's a line somewhere someone will quote and say, like, maybe when Jung was writing about the auxiliary function or the inferior function, when he's saying, like, oh, it'll be every, attitude different than the leading or whatever. I don't think, like, even if it's the case where, let's say, the inferior has to be the opposite attitude of the leading, and or a certain attitude in your weaker functions is you just don't have access to, and you only have access to one attitude. Again, I don't see why that would be the case for every single function in your consciousness. I think it would make sense that you would have the ability, depending on your, I guess, development, or if you're more sophisticated in one of these functions, that you would have the ability to switch orientations, switch attitudes, whether that be because of external demands or just because you've developed a certain level of sophistication, that you would be able to not only use, let's say, if you were, really good at the feeling aspects of things, not only be able to use just extroverted feeling or just introverted feeling, but you'd be able to use both. Or if you're a really creative type and you're using intuition left and right, like, I would imagine that on some level you would have access to both attitudes. And ditto for sensing. If you're, I don't know what context you want to apply it to. But whatever. Either way, feel free to, if you're a Jungian purist and you want to quote some passage from Jung that you think definitively says that a person, only has access to one function attitude of each function, I mean, go ahead. I'm happy to read those and think about them.